The million-dollar question regarding next-gen currently is none other than how much will next-gen consoles actually cost? In this video, I want to try to tackle that very topic, seeing as of right now in late August 2020, we still have no confirmation regarding the cost of either system, with just 3 months to go before their expected release. So without further ado, let's get started. Pricing has had a much bigger impact on consumers than you might actually think, and you can't discuss pricing for next gen without acknowledging how it's been handled in the past and what's effect we've seen it take on the longevity of a generation. Sony and Microsoft have had mixed messaging issues, and that is not a mistake. Sometimes leaving consumers with questions works better in your favor, and that's a tactic we've seen them employ in generations past. During the PlayStation 3 era is a prime example of Sony dropping the ball coming off hot of the heels of the best-selling home console of all time. The PlayStation 2 didn't need much convincing to get into consumers' homes. It was viewed as the cheapest option if you simply wanted a DVD player, and the bonus was that it doubled as a gaming console. While it may seem harsh, in retrospect that's often cited as to why the system sold extremely well. At the time, Microsoft was just starting the Xbox brand, and making headways was seemingly hard even during the prime days of Halo. Consumers weren't fully invested in their ecosystems just yet. This actually helped the launch of the Xbox 360, because people's expectations was much lower with Microsoft's next-gen system. The 360 ended up impressing consumers by not just releasing first, but cheaper. Though to be fair, that wasn't something known at the time. Microsoft weighed heavily with its online connectivity and services, making the 360 the system that seemed more future-proof right out of the gate. This was something that would eventually push all console manufacturers forward and bring online gaming to the forefront. While not perfect, online-focused games were starting to become the norm. Another thing that became the norm was monthly and yearly subscriptions, at least on Microsoft's end. The PlayStation 3's reveal was a messy one to say the least. A mediocre game list, feeble services, and a $600 price tag, which birthed Ken Kurosagi's infamous quote, "We want consumers to think to themselves, I will work more hours to buy one. We want people to feel like they want a PlayStation 3, irrespective of anything else." Essentially telling gamers to get a second job if they couldn't afford a $600 system. Bundled with a higher price was the fact that the system was releasing much later than the Xbox 360, and that the so-called cell technology was much harder to program for. With a cheaper price tag and a market lead, developers began to make their games for Xbox 360 and ported them over to the PlayStation 3. This led to performance issues in multiple big-profile games, and it helped Microsoft on the sales front. The cell processing was something that Sony took a long time to sort out. This is something that I covered in my last video, and how by the end of the generation things had shifted in Sony's favor. The PlayStation 3 eventually caught up in sales, and Sony began to showcase its first-party stable of exclusives more robustly. At the same time, Microsoft was dealing with various technical hurdles just about the entire generation. The infamous Red Ring of Death had plagued them for years, and lesser-known issues would surface like the scratch disk laser issues, and the endless list of error codes causing unexpected crashes were a headache for them the remaining years of the console. All of this made it even harder to understand Microsoft plans heading into the next generation. The well-known how to share your PlayStation 4 games moment from the 2013 E3 is what most people remember and consider the nail on the coffin of the Xbox One. After Sony responded to the Xbox One's Kinect connectivity and the Xbox One's higher price tag. What people actually forget is that during that same quick moment in time, Microsoft had a much better lineup of games presented that very E3, and it was backed by having a much stronger day one launch lineup. But none of that would end up mattering, since the Xbox One was ultimately deemed a weaker console tied to a camera system that at the time people felt was invasive while still charging you way more for it. It took Microsoft almost a full year to backtrack all of their launch day claims, now remembered as the Dawn Metric era. They removed Kinect from the system alongside all of the invasive online check-ins for used games. The problem was that even by then, with a meager offering of exclusives in its first year, the PlayStation 4 had taken off sales-wise, and it created an unsurmountable lead. At least some good came out of Microsoft's struggles. Game Pass was born out of the necessity to get people into their ecosystem, using the Netflix model to reel in more users to subscriptions, netting them more console sales and a soar in profits. All of that leads us to present day, where pricing for the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X is the most sought after data point we're still missing, and something both Sony and Microsoft are holding tight to their chest, waiting for the other to go first. Both companies are expected to come in at a higher price point this time around, and the custom AMD chips inside both systems with the matching GPUs and cooling options are raising the production cost for both systems to unprecedented levels, making neither of them eager to be the first one to divulge their pricing just yet. The prevailing theory is that whoever has to announce the $500 price tag first will take the brunt of the negativity by both gaming press and gamers. Whoever gets to go after will simply confirm the status quo if they choose to match the price, or if they choose to undercut to get ahead. The thing is that Microsoft is much more interested in undercutting Sony at all costs if given the opportunity, where Sony is interested in losing as little money as possible and matching whatever the price of the Xbox Series X ends up being. I'll paint you guys a quick scenario. If Microsoft decides to reveal their price first and the Xbox Series X launches at $500 while the Xbox Series S launches at $350, Sony would be more than happy to confirm that the PlayStation 5 with the disc drive is $500 while the discless PS5 is $400. They don't feel the urge to undercut Microsoft since, as I mentioned before, production costs for both systems are at an all-time high and they expect to lose money on each system for the first few years. However, if Sony were to go first and then reveal that the disc drive PS5 is $500 while the discless one is $400, Microsoft's response would be to fully undercut them by at least $50 and throw in a few months of Game Pass, essentially giving you day one launch games for free, even if it's not Halo Infinite. It's been well established that Microsoft will have a rougher go on launch with the delay of their flagship game and the perceived notion of no exclusives for the first few years. So any advantage that they can get, even if it comes at the cost of a reduced console launch price, is a boon for them. At the very least, to keep sales close until their newly acquired studios begin to pump out games on a consistent basis. One of the freedoms these newly acquired studios have is that they're not forced to continue to churn out what they've been previously working in the past, something that Double Fine has already expressed. The freedom to do whatever they want and put ideas into production that simply weren't possible without the capital from a company like Microsoft. A new batch of IPs will always improve the odds of getting consumers to purchasing your new console, especially if it's priced lower or matching the competition. Another point that can't be disregarded is how most third-party games will simply run better on Xbox Series X, something that we already saw happen back on the Xbox 360 era, with the added benefit that all of these games will also be part of Game Pass subscriptions nets Microsoft a bigger net of potential eyes. This is without even mentioning that the Xbox Series S will be eventually positioned as the cheaper next-gen option, something that Sony can't match. I hope you guys are enjoying this closer look series. I'm having a blast putting it together and discussing next-gen consoles. Hopefully Nintendo decides to jump in the fray at the very least with a revision sometime next year. If you're new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya!